Hey everybody, I'm Jack. I'm the CEO and co-founder at Part3. Part3 is a platform that's aiming to give architects and engineers control over their construction contract administration phase. And I'm lucky today because I'm joined by a friend and a colleague we've been working with for a few years now, which is Phil Haderlie. Phil is the principal and an architect at VCBO. Phil, great to have you.
Thanks for having me, Jack.
It's really good to talk to you today. I've been looking forward to this one, getting to learn a little bit more about the story of the last few years of working together. And it's kind of fun to reflect back on where we were when we started that. And Phil and I were just jamming a little bit on how unlikely it was that we would meet and then how close we've become over the last few years. But before we get into that story, why don't you give us a little bit of background on you, your role, what you do at VCBO, and how you ended up in that position?
All right, so I've been here at the company for about 17 years. I'm a principal now, but I've just kind of worked my way up through managing projects mostly. So my forte is to bring people together, to bring teams together, to organize things, and to get stuff done. So my background is just always, well, the Legos are in the back there. So I started building stuff with Legos when I was a kid, and now I build stuff with Legos in real life, like full scale. So that's kind of how I landed here. And VCBO is we're involved in all different types of buildings. We don't do a lot of custom residential, but we do everything else on the commercial side. We do interior design and urban planning, and we've got like 120 of us now. So I guess that'd be a mid-sized firm in the nationally, but in Salt Lake, we're considered one of the biggest firms here in Utah. So,
And you're relatively scattered, right? You have a couple of offices in Utah and you work with clients in a pretty broad stretch across the country.
yeah, we do. We have projects in other states, but mostly regional, but we do have a lot of work right now, as you know, in Hawaii. And we've done in the past, we've done projects in foreign countries like Italy and Mexico, other places like that.
So let's go back a few years, and it has been a few years now, and talk about when we first met. Because when we first met, I think you were just at the point when you were starting to explore some alternatives. You were starting to kind of look at how the teams work in the CA phase and across the board, not just in CA. And we started looking at how we can do a trial with Part3 at VCBO. I was hoping we could kind of go back then, think about that position you were in a few years back, and think about what problems or challenges do you think the team were facing at the time? Like, what made you start to consider adopting new tools or software in this phase?
Yeah, so one interesting thing about us, 10 years ago, we had developed our own software that probably could have become Part3 if we would have been software developers. But our software, we hired a guy, and he was full time for 3 years to develop this platform. And our platform was kind of aging. It wasn't doing what we wanted it to do. We didn't have really good support for it because the guy who designed it was sitting on a beach somewhere and retired. So we really felt like we needed a company that could partner with us, that could provide ongoing support, constantly be updating and refreshing the software. And so we kind of scrubbed the internet and looked for lots of different companies. We looked at other software, and we kind of narrowed it down to Part3, mainly because it had a lot of the features that we already had in our custom software, but also there was a lot of innovative things there that kind of we loved, and then even as we were doing our trial with you guys at the very beginning, we felt like we were part of the team to develop the software because we were meeting weekly talking about kind of things that we could do different, things that we could tweak. And so over the last 2 years, it's been really cool to me to see some of our ideas are inside the Part3 software. Like, we've been able to shape it the way that worked best for us, but also you've taken some of our ideas and then made them better or tweaked them so that it could be more flexible for all architects, right? So So that part has been really cool.
So fair to say it was kind of twofold. One was to replace the internal system, but second was to find that partner, someone who'd work with you, someone who was sort of moving at the speed you wanted it to move at too, and adding new features, adding new functionality and tools.
Yeah, and I'm a big believer in relationships, and kind of the quality of the relationship will directly kind of, like in a building, for example, the quality of your relationships in that building process will directly impact the quality of the project and how cool it is and how successful it is. And if relationships aren't there, then it's not fun. It's not, you know, it's not something that you really look back on with
Yeah.
fondness. If you're going through a project with tough relationships, it's just a grind. But in this case, I think we've connected well with your team, and we felt like you listened, and we felt like the relationship is there. And so the product kind of reflects that, I think, in a lot of ways.
Yeah. I think over the last couple of years, you've managed to meet probably half the team in total. Almost everyone at Part 3 knows who Phil is, and everyone knows who VCBO are. So it's definitely both ways.
Well, we've seen you grow up from 5 people to however many you are now. So that's cool.
Yeah, that's true. And hopefully many more. But when you were at that beginning phase, when we were just getting started, you sort of mentioned there that it was a bit of a trial. I think we considered it a bit of a pilot project in the beginnings. What was your first impressions of the product when you first made the choice to do that trial?
Well, comparing Part 3 to other software, the nice thing about it is it's all cloud-based. It doesn't require you to have a separate server or separate infrastructure. It's very easy to just jump into it and get started. The interface was kind of clean and kind of very easy to kind of work your way around in it. And then I don't know if you'll get to this, but the fact that one of your co-founders is an architect and thinks like an architect, therefore, Part 3 is basically really feels like it's made for architects, right? And that's the whole goal. And we talked about early on, what are the pain points for architects? And you've talked about that a few times. And it feels like you guys just get it. You know what we're facing, you know what we're up against, and you're trying to develop the tool in a way that will take away some of that pain in the process. So
I love that that comes across because it's hard to capture something that's for architects by architects in an industry that doesn't tend to build for architects. It's sometimes
right.
hard to get across why that is a good thing. But yeah, Jess's experience when we first started was super valuable. Jess was one of the people who lived and breathed the pain. And then very quickly, what we realized was well, she lived a very specific part of that pain, right? She worked on construction in a specific part of the world with specific types of clients. And we really quickly needed more partners to give a deeper understanding of how that can vary and other patterns and other ways to build it and fix it and other perspectives that we needed to bring in, which is where you came in. So it was super useful really, really early on to get that. What was your experience once the product rolled out? Like, do you remember that first onboarding and those first projects? How'd they go?
Well, I kind of always love digging in and learning new tools and just kind of geek out that way on things. So I mean, for me, the learning curve was not bad at all in terms of picking up Part 3, and we just basically started using it on a small project just to see how it would go. We came across things that were little bumps or things where we needed to try to figure out workarounds and things like that. But then we would mention those, and then relatively quickly, our workaround was obsolete because it had already been kind of fixed, in Part 3. So I mean, I don't think it was that tough at all. Now we've had to kind of scale Part 3 and try to get it to the rest of the office, right? So now we have 65 people, we said, that are in there using it. And so that's been another process of how to roll it out, how to get people up to speed with how to use it, and how to get them kind of to stop using our old system. So we're kind of
Yeah.
halfway through that process now. So
So let's dig into it, because I think this is where most people would love to learn. And I think Phil is an exceptional um, ideal of how you can roll out any new software. It was great that it happened with us and with Part3, but really what you did was you created a fantastic change management strategy that I think others could learn a lot from. So you are now scaled up to 65 people. You've got $1 billion worth of active construction, 100 projects almost active on the software now. So as you look at the process you went through, moving to not only scaling internally, but also scaling with the engineers, consultants, contractors, clients that you work with as well, and bringing those into the software. Like, can you describe the starting point and what internal process you decided you needed to start to bring more team members in once you knew this was a firm-wide rollout you wanted to pursue?
So we had to get the firm leadership on board with committing to the software and actually doing the rollout. And we had to, I think we basically had our pilot program going for like a year. We had a few projects in there just to really show that it's viable. And so that was a whole other process, just getting everybody to sign off and to cut the check to actually commit and sign up, right? And then once that happened, you really have to find like the cheerleaders that are, so we had a handful of people, maybe 4 or 5 people that had been the guinea pigs at the beginning that were just using it from the very beginning, and they became kind of our Part3 experts in the office. And we had some who were project manager and some who are more administrative. In our office, the way we do things, we have the PMs run the CA process through the whole process, but we also have some administrative assistants that are more clerical. They're the ones that are doing the data entry part and doing the kind of inputting of the stuff. If we get an email that needs to be put into Part3, they're the ones who do it. So we have admin people and PMs. We had a few of those in each category that were really kind of the super Part3 users, the really, and then those became the trainers for kind of our teams. And so Part3 offers the training support, but we found that Part3 software was so customizable at that point, right? There's a few things that you need to do differently in our process to create the custom environment that we need for doing VCBO projects. So we found somebody here in our staff that just really loves kind of that whole thing, and she put together kind of a training book about the steps that we do to customize Part3 to work with VCBO. And then we basically took each team in the office, and to me, you're not going to learn it unless you start using it. So we tried to time the trainings with the teams to be like a few weeks before they start a project, right? So we would grab a project team and we would meet with them for an hour, show them all the basics of Part3, and then the next week they would be using it and learning it. We also recorded all of our trainings in Zoom so that people can reference back to those. And we kind of broke Part3 into kind of 2 training categories. There was the kind of all the document side of Part3, so RFIs, submittals, ASIs, that kind of thing. And then there's more the financial side of Part3, which is the change orders and things like that. And then we would do maybe a third training for field reports and things like that. So it kind of breaks into those 3 categories. And then we could kind of, so in 3 separate meetings, we would train that team, and they would be using it, and then it was pretty easy from there. So now we've grown to 65 people. So we did that training process, 10 or 15 times in the office. So it was a commitment to time, but I think you've got to have solid training, because now people are excited about it, and people who aren't using it are saying, when can I start using it on my project, right? So
That's awesome. Yeah, I like how you approached it, because I think getting the basics of just using the software might not take too long, but then have, like you were saying, it's the adoption, the ease of use, simple UI, but you end up creating very specific ways of working that are VCBO specific and client specific. And I think that's important. We want the software to be useful, but still enable you to work the way you want to work. I think it would
Yeah.
be foolish of a team like Part3 to rock up and say, everyone must work the Part3 way. Here's the standard building blocks. There's no deviation. And I think you were one of the first really successful architecture firms to make it your own and to create a lot of customizations, to add on a lot of few extra catches and tools and processes that made the team a lot more effective. Even the way that you were using the meeting minutes function, which led to a new feature in Part3 as well. Like there's a lot of those innovative use cases that you kind of like set for the team and then set for other architects too.
Yeah, I guess we would sort of break Part3 in a way, or we would be using it in a way that maybe you never even thought of, and we were kind of pushing Part3 kind of beyond its limits at the time, and then you kind of started creating some of those features that so that our workarounds weren't there. But yeah, I mean, how do you like from way back when, your original vision of Part3 to where it is now? Is it totally different? Have you kind of been surprised at the journey that it's been?
I don't think it's changed too much. I think the initial vision will have been to set the groundwork for as many tools as we can for architects to manage CA. I think
Yeah,
the only real reason the vision has changed is as we've grown, we've sort of got the right and the ability to think a little further ahead and further along. So now we think less about providing tools like submittals or RFIs or field reporting or change orders. And now we think about it as more of a holistic platform. So we try and
yeah,
integrate that now into the document management piece that we're moving into and maintaining things like drawing sets. So that allow us to scale much deeper into the practice and into the firm operations. So it's not so much changed. I think that's why this partnership works so well, because you saw the vision, you saw where we wanted to take it, you shared it, and were able to kind of push us and hold us accountable along the way. So it made it a really fun process.
yeah,
You did a few other things that I thought were really important. So you talked a lot about the training, the process, the fact that you needed some internal champions. But I thought what was really interesting as well was how you created those internal champions. Because once you got the executive buy-in, you did a few firm-wide presentations and all hands meetings where you gave a little bit of a cameo to things like tooling changes or process changes you're making across the firm. I remember joining one of them and supporting you as you introduced Part3 to the team. And I thought what you did really well was you also just hyped it up. You also just made there a sort of an exciting feel about something new that was coming in. It was solving a pain that everyone felt. And you sort of built that excitement and that enthusiasm with the team. And it was quite visible to see. You did that really, really well. Do you think, is that something you reflect back on as like a big pivotal moment in it? Or is that something you kind of almost forget in the midst of all the meetings?
yeah. I guess I've forgotten all of that part, and I guess I'm not super wild and crazy and enthusiastic person all the time, but I don't know. I do think that you've got to get people excited. They've got to see, and it's going to have to be important to show what's in it for them and why should they make the change. And if you can show that it's going to make their life easier, it's so efficient. And I think there is a ton of time savings in Part3, but we haven't laid off anybody because of Part3. It's just that their roles have evolved, and Part3 has done more of the kind of tedious stuff is now automated. So it's just so much better.
You built excitement in the team. You ran a pilot. You got buy-in at the executive layer. You showed how people's time would be freed up, and then you rolled it out at scale. It's
Yeah.
been a couple of years now. We're sort of deep into this. When you look back, was it the right decision? Has it worked well? Has the team definitely like benefited from it? Have you become more efficient? I know you mentioned you haven't had to lay off. You've grown. You've taken on more projects, and you've grown as a team. So has it been the right move?
Yeah, I think we've got everything that we hoped for out of it, and we see where it's going, and we're excited for the future of Part3. I think, I don't get as much questions about it before. Everything is just seems to be humming along. People seem to know what they're doing. with the software. So originally I was like one of the only ones doing the training, and now the whole office is kind of trained. It's kind of less of a load on me. So I feel like overall our rollout was successful. This is one thing for people to consider. You can actually use survey data to help you gauge how your training rollout is doing in the office. And so we used like a Qualtrics survey software, and we create a survey that says, how are you feeling in part 3 about these certain parts of the software? And we had a slider bar like scale of 1 to 10. How do you feel with your ability to do this and this and this? And so we sent out a survey like a year and a half ago, right at the very beginning of training. And so we could see right away what focus our training needed to be, you know. And then after we had done trainings for a year, we did the same exact survey. We just sent it out to the same people. And then we can basically cross-check those same data points and see how our training has helped solve. And we did show improvement in all the areas that people were feeling more comfortable. So that's something you should definitely consider if you're training people, is to have a survey before and after to see how that training impacted. And then that last survey, now we can take that survey data and kind of fine tune our training moving forward to focus on those other areas where people need help, right? So
Yeah, that's so powerful. You got a baseline and you can come back to it. You can keep measuring that and tracking forwards because it doesn't end, right? It wasn't a start and finish. You're right. It was year 1, year 2, and
yeah.
that's data you can use to hold us accountable to, making sure the software continues to do everything it needs to do.
Yeah, I think we shared some of our surveys with you guys, so
Yeah,
that was super
pretty
cool.
sure that led to another feature as well, which was cool. Right, I'm gonna shift focus. So you mentioned and sort of overviewed what VCBO is and sort of how you characterize the firm and describe the firm's strengths and size. So in what situation would you, if any, refer Part 3 to others? Like, who do you think it's really set up for? And you know that you kind of know the competitive landscape out there and what other tools may or may not provide similar things. And I think when you were first evaluating, you were considering a couple of others. So maybe give us your experience on who you think Part 3 is built for.
So I think part 3 can scale to any size of firm, small to large, in terms of just usability. And I think maybe your pricing structure hopefully reflects that maybe for 1 or 2 people, maybe it's cheaper, or I don't know how that works, but it seems like those same pain points happen no matter if you're a small firm or a big firm. We find we really, because of our size, there's a few things here. It's very valuable to have things standardized, to have things look the same, to have the same message that goes out, to have all of your documents on a same template. If you're doing things manually, then one partner is going to do something different than another. Your RFI format's going to look different. Everything's going to be, so just from just looking professional, I think is nice to like standardize. There's also, having everything logged when it comes in, when it goes out. So you're kind of protecting people from potential legal issues here, right? You because everything in part 3 is logged, you can easily go back and find things, find out when you sent it, when you received it, all this stuff. And those are tied to contract requirements that we have, right? So it's really critical to us that we have a running clock in part 3 that's going to tell us when something needs to go back so that we can fulfill contract requirements and things like that. So I would say that it can scale to any size of firm, really.
That's awesome. Thanks, Phil. Is there anything else you think I missed? Anything else that you want to share about your experience?
Well, one other thing to think about is, I mean, just it's that relationship again, and making sure anytime that I've had a question about anything in part 3, there's that little question mark down in the corner. Um, that's been very powerful, that it can flag to the exact issue that I'm having. I can send in a question to your team. You can look at it. You can understand exactly which thing I'm dealing with. And the response time is usually almost the same day, because you understand that there's the critical nature of like, I've got to get this thing issued, and
Yeah.
I've got a question or something's not maybe working the way that I need it to. And so the response time in terms of customer service, I think, has been really good. So that's not the same with all softwares out there, right? And the last thing is also to think about, you have a platform that allows digital tracking and collaboration from all of your outside consultants, that's very powerful. But you also still maintain ownership and control of all of your data. And we have owners or contractors that kind of, in a process, they'll kind of require us to use certain other software systems. And I think it's kind of tough on our teams when they have to go learn how to use Procore or an Autodesk, or every project we're gonna have to chase to a different software. So I think it's better to have ownership of your own software system for managing CA. And then that software system then can be linked to those other softwares, and like the Procore link that you have, which was, I mean, that was a really critical feature for us at the very beginning. That Procore link, we were getting buried by thousands of emails from Procore, and we were required to go in and put our answers inside of Procore. And we looked at the legal language of Procore, and when we put stuff into Procore, we lose our copyright of that information. And that was extremely, like, that was a huge red flag for us. Like, we don't want to give away the copyright of our stuff. And you don't always have, because you don't own the Procore license, the contractor does. You don't really know what's going to happen to that data. You don't know if you can ever get a copy of it back. If there's a lawsuit, you don't own the data. So there's just there's things about Part 3 and about keeping ownership of your own system and your own data that are very beneficial, like from a legal point of view, right?
Yeah, I love that control and ownership. And you're right, because well, any given architect could be working on a handful of projects and they could all have completely different GC tools. You mentioned a few of them, the Procores, the Autodesks, the e-builders of the world, CMICs. It's difficult to kind of create your own process that you can replicate. So no, that's a really, really powerful insight, making sure we control that data and take ownership of it. This has been a ton of fun, Phil. I'm super, super happy you're able to do this and help share your experience. I know so many others are going to be able to learn from it. I think not only adopting the tool really well, but being able to get the team buy-in and roll out that change management cycle was super impressive. Thanks for everything you've done the last year and being this continued partner through that phase.
Yeah, no problem. And we're just really interested to see where you go with the software. We want you to be successful, and so that we can still have Part 3 around. And I know you'll be there for a while. I mean, hopefully forever. So, but yeah, we've really appreciated everything that you've done to help us with this issue, and to help streamline the office and everything else. It's been great.
We're definitely not going anywhere. That's for sure. We're happy to share more with anyone else that would like to learn about Phil's experience, and anyone who would like to learn more about what Part 3 can do for their firm as well. Just feel free to reach out. But thanks so much again, Phil. It's been awesome.
See ya, Jack.